Prescription drugs have dramatically impacted my life and people around me. In or around 1998, when my wife left, became a lesbian, we had 3 kids together, and so it was a tough time. I had not seen a doctor regularly, and someone had suggested that I see one, that I might be depressed. Obviously, I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and so I did. I went and I saw a doctor, and he gave me a prescription, and it was some new antidepressant, and I'm not going to name names of that today, but I went to the store and I got it and I took it, and I went home, and I had this terrible reaction. I was extremely nervous and upset, and of course I was also in the middle of a relationship crisis, and my home seemed in jeopardy. So it all just got really messy. And my wife at the time, we'd known each other since we were kids. I met her in high school, and we dated and went through college and got married, and then had 3 kids. So she knew me, and I was going nuts, and I needed to leave the house. I just knew that I needed to get away. I was really scared of what I was feeling. My toes felt like they were going to curl. And why no one thought to call the doctor and tell him what was going on, I have no idea. But I didn't. And shame on me. I just didn't have enough friends and family around. We were in Arlington, Texas at the time, and I'd really been killing it in business, and also pursuing acting, and making some films, and traveling the world, running my own company. So, obviously I'd been dealt a interesting set of cards to deal with, and so I was trying to leave the house, and my wife ran out, jumped on the hood of my car, and one way or the other, as I was trying to leave, I guess this, from the outside looking in, this is a fairly affluent neighborhood in Arlington, Texas, but I guess this looked like a domestic dispute. And next thing I know, there is a patrol car pulling up, and he's interviewing my wife, and I'm in the car, and he comes up to me, and he asked me if I would go inside and get my things and leave. Well, I was trying to leave in the first place, so it was hard for me to. And I was not in a state to really present a very coherent argument to him. So I did. When I got a few things out of my office and in my bedroom, and got in the car, and I drove off. And I realized that I'd just been led out of my home. And I was really lost. So I stayed in my car for a night, and then I woke up and I realized, maybe I should get an apartment for a week, and I did. So I got one of those week-long hotel stays in the neighborhood, but every night that week my toes curled. I just cringed over that from that medication. And I was in a deep trouble. I mean, trauma. I mean, I'd grown up, not really believing in divorce, and really loved this woman, and I loved my kids, and was in the middle of 1998 with absolutely no support. And we'd gone to a local church in the area on occasion, and I reached out to them, and I'm sure I sounded crazy, and they didn't want to have anything to do with me. There happened to be another church that had several kind of a counseling program going on, and I ended up meeting with a man there at this large Baptist church that had a kind of a counseling or therapy ministry, and that helped quite a bit. So, I ended up, staying on that medication or improvising, modifying it a little bit. And, if you listen to one of my prior videos, I describe how I, my life fell apart later in 2013, 14, and 15. Well, it fell apart back here in 1998, 1999. So I ended up going to Houston, and eventually, kind of picking up the pieces, and my ex-wife took my kids to Austin. And in Houston, I was living very modestly, and also ended up having to, or I not have to, but I chose to, get a home for my ex-wife and my children to live, so they could have a safe place. And, but I was playing, highly competitive basketball about 7 to 10 times a week, in addition to running back and forth between Austin and Houston on weekends, and seeing my kids and trying to make amends with my my ex-wife. And my career, although I thought it was really kind of a job that was kind of beneath me that I landed in Houston, I ended up, investing there, and, next thing you know, I'm an executive in a financial firm, and have a large staff. I'm a natural leader, so I had, and I was good with computers, and everything really kind of just felt easy peasy for me, but I was really missing this connection to other people, and so basketball was a great way for me to connect, physically and emotionally, discharge some of the anger and frustration and confusion that I had. So I'm playing basketball, real intensely, super competitive leagues there in Houston, and man, I fall one day, I get tripped and fall on my knee, and my patellar tendon ruptured. My kneecap came up on my quadricep, and my life changed in that moment. And I remember being quite high in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and I had an appointment or two that I was going to have to miss because of the trip to the hospital. So I made a couple of calls on the way, and one of them was to my therapist, or a counselor that I had been working with in Houston, and he was laughing that nobody ever, during a trauma like that, thinks to call him and reschedule. But anyway, I did. And interestingly, I ended up really, falling into a deep depression shortly after that fall. And I'd been on cloud nine. I mean, I had managed to not reconcile with my ex-wife at the time, but this is around 2004. So this is fast forward about, 5 years, 6 years. And surprised at how quickly my mood dropped, because I really had been counting on this super high intensity athletics to help me feel good about everything from my personal relationships to my professional to my relationships with my children. My parents were both alive then, and it seemed like I was, everything was really, really working out well. And so I really got sad. And it took about 2 months for the operation and the recovery to occur. And during that 2 months, my therapist had suggested that I go see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist diagnosed me, because of this sudden change, as bipolar. And so he gave me some medicine. I think one of the primary medication was, I think, Lamictal. And it did make me feel better. I was having trouble sleeping, and then he gave me something else to sleep. And that was the baseline for, that I went to I never, even though I recovered and I didn't get back on the basketball floor for a variety of reasons, but I started wakeboarding, and that was less shock on my system, and it was pretty exciting. And it was a good family thing for the fiance and her 3 girls that I'd met, as well as trying to blend my 3 kids in. So we had a lot of fun on the lake, and I ended up recovering fully physically. But I stayed on that medication, and I guess I accepted the fact at that time, or I accepted as a fact at that time, that I was bipolar. And slowly you go back every 6 months after they get you, kind of stabilized. And so I'd go back for med checks, and I met with Dr. Wright, had a practice in North Houston in the Champions area. And I liked him. He had a large staff there, and I ended up meeting with some of his assistants for the med checks, and it seemed like they were always kind of tweaking my medication. And at one point, I had some complications I just was really stressed out, and ended up seeing him again finally. And he I remember the look on his face, like, what was my nurse thinking? By giving you this. This is absolutely, worst thing to give someone with your profile. So he ended up making some adjustments, and I went on. But it turned out that I had some terrible experiences that formed in my life. And I can't necessarily relate them totally to the medication that I was on, but man, I had of course, he was surprised whenever my life completely fell apart, and I had, no money, no insurance, and, at that point I couldn't afford to continue some expensive appointments with him, nor the medication. And I had weaned myself off slowly. I looked into the internet to find some recommended approaches to wean myself off of the meds, and I did. And that's when I started really finding out what my core issues were and what had been missing, not just recently, but really all my life. It really forced me to really get quiet with myself and really explore my problems that I had brought forth out of childhood, and had some repeated traumas that I was repeating in my life, and for some reason I can sit and talk to a therapist, and even though I can tell them a script that has some incredible tragedy with it, the way that I present it is as if I'm strong and I'm doing okay. So I hide my pain pretty well, and that didn't really work to my advantage in the long run. So that made me go back and explore about the medical field and doctors, and we've all seen some of these stories about opioids and people abusing prescription drugs. And of course, there's plenty of shows and documentaries and dramas that are out there about those. So if you're interested in that or entertained by that, have at it. I've encountered too many of those in my personal life. My fiance's mother and father were hooked on prescription drugs by the end of the 8 years that we were together. And I've seen how that just totally erodes people's lives. I've lost friends who had children that got hooked on opioids and destroyed marriages and families. Obviously, that is, it's kind of a no-brainer in regard to drug abuse. But what I'm really here to talk about today is, how doctors prescribe these things, and they basically just get a sliver of the problem in someone's life that they're trying to fix or heal. And heal may be a stretch there, but really it's to, we all like, this is a cliche that we like fast solutions so we can continue with the life that we've imagined in our head that we really want. But the problem is that, our bodies are not all homogeneous. We're not all the same. And so some of these drugs obviously react differently in different bodies and in different circumstances, and in different periods of people's lives, their bodies respond to them differently. And I'm talking as a man, but I know women that have dealt with this, premenopause and then menopause, and also before they had children. And so there's some complexities that we haven't fully nailed down to fully understand, but we keep trying. And I'm not an anti-doctor. I have doctors in my family that I've known quite well. I've also studied doctors extremely closely, interviewed family members, various doctors, mostly from an approach of my curiosity for my own benefit, as well as to portray a doctor. I get cast to be a doctor now and then. So I've studied the healing thing, and I'll say, these guys and ladies make tremendous investments in their career. I think I was told by my stepfather that he was president of AMA at one time, and he said that today, and this is maybe in 2020, when he told me this, that it cost $1 million for a doctor to get their full accreditation. That's a huge investment. So, I'm thinking, if I've invested in this, I've also got loans. Maybe, maybe I'm from a rich family, but even then, everyone is really looking for me to have solutions. And, maybe I'm 35 years old, and if someone comes to me with a problem, I ought to be able to fix it because I paid $1 million to get maybe a great education at a fancy school. And by and large, there are a lot of I'm certain that I go to the doctor and I've got a broken arm, I'm in the right place. Well, lives are not the same as these bones, and so I think you know where I'm going with this. These encounters that we have, the circumstances that we have, are very difficult to communicate in a succinct presentation of 15 minutes to a doctor. And I remember my ex-wife coming to me and telling me that she was feeling sick, and she talked to her doctor, and he asked her how the marriage was, and she said not good, and she said, well, he said, maybe you ought to leave. I thought, that's a pretty quick diagnosis. So I don't know if she was telling me the full story there or not. My ex-wife was beautiful and lovely, so maybe there were some other motives in place there. But anyway, I'm not trying to pick on ghosts or people from my past necessarily. But what I do run into are people that are encountering trouble in their life. And when they come to me, often, they are considering some either alternative methods, some natural methods of dealing with their situation. And then they're also, considering some medical advice, and also working with therapists. And so my counsel is commonly, well, make sure you realize that, anyone that's making a living from helping, has an objective to, if they've been trained and certified, there's a code that they're really presenting from that, may or may not fully address your problem. So I think one of the things that I've encountered recently was encouraging people to find a way to approach problems as a family or as a tribe or as a small collective, and find a way to take another person with you to a doctor's visit, to a med check, to a chiropractor or some healer that you're going to make sure that you're being clear in what you present and that you're hearing everything that's being repeated back, or being your diagnosis is heard by the person that you're seeking help from, and that you are getting advice that considers all of the possibilities. So I hope this is beneficial to you. I'd love to hear more stories, your story, around prescriptions and efforts to use not only drugs but natural remedies. All the best.